It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'll be your host this morning. We're going to get our heads around some issues that we probably need to address. You know, yesterday I shared a little bit about my own personal experience with the federal system. And this morning, or I should say last night, word broke on a new watchdog report that was out from the Milwaukee, Wisconsin Journal-Sentinel. And in that report, they outlined, their headline was, ATF uses rogue tactics in storefront stings across the nation. So we're going to talk a little bit about that because some of the examples that they've given here about how they utilized mentally deficient individuals, allowed children to smoke pot in their presence, let individuals who were known dangerous criminals and prior felons walk out of the building with weapons, how they bought weapons that they paid so much money for, they actually people were buying them at sporting goods stores, driving across town, legally buying them at sporting goods stores, like, you know, Gander Mountain and Bass Pro and so forth, and then driving over there and selling them to them for an immediate profit, literally 20 minutes after they bought it. They lost a machine gun, which has never been recovered. We're going to just kind of expose this because I got to tell you, this is the kind of thing that makes Americans feel like we live in a police state. And when you see this type of abuse going on about our nation, and the purpose of this is so separated from the realities of it. Well, anyway, we'll get into it. The title for that section is ATF. The F Troop of Agencies Runs Amok. Our second topic this morning will be on Syrian Sarin. There's another lie that's been exposed by the Obama administration, and the media, of course, has ignored it. They haven't done their due diligence or done any kind of journalistic investigation. They took, again, the White House's and the administration and the government's word for what the truth was and published it verbatim. Seymour Hersh has come out with an excellent article that basically alleges the Obama administration lied about who made the sarin gas in Syria, that it was in fact the rebels, that we are supporting, that we are arming, that we are training with your taxpayer dollars. Hersh is a well-known, well-respected author. I believe he's a Pulitzer Prize winner. I mean, the guy's no slouch. He's one of the few journalists that's out there that actually is willing to step up and say the truth. Our third topic will be NSA infiltrates online gaming, according to Edward Snowden. Another bomb drops on the NSA. They've worked so massively in online gaming, including Xbox and all these video game systems that are out there, online game systems, that there were so many of them working here, trying to find one terrorist that was using these gaming systems to communicate or transfer money, that they actually had to write a plan to not conflict with each other. They called it a deconfliction document. I mean, I suspect that the reality was that what they were really doing wasn't necessarily looking for terrorists, but also enjoying their time on the government's and the taxpayers' dime while they played a lot of video games. I mean, the ridiculousness of that, and I'm going to talk to you a little bit about the issue of of the letter or the note that has been sent out by 500 authors globally about how this has to stop. All right, our fourth topic will be the Obamacare system ravages volunteer fire departments. Fire departments are going to lose their health insurance in the thousands across the country. That cannot be good for America. I mean, even in suburban areas, it's not just rural. Most fire departments are not paid. And to strip them of their ability to provide health insurance for their firefighters who volunteer and put their lives in danger every day is just, it's criminal. Not to mention the fact that there's a new article that broke also in reference to the Obamacare exchanges being vulnerable to Wi-Fi attacks. All of them. The only one that wasn't was the federal one. But virtually every state exchange is vulnerable to Wi-Fi attack, where they can steal your information, your passwords, the data that you're, the whole thing is just, I got to tell you, every day it's like just another torrent of abuse and treason. All right, let's get into our first story. This one's a good one. The ATF has been using rogue tactics in a half a dozen cities. All right, so you got to hear what's going on here. They open up these pawn shops and they open up these stores, and they populate them with ATF agents who try to act as if they are local community people. They ran a place called Squid Smoke Shop in Portland, Oregon, and they offered this guy. There was, I got to tell you, this is so disturbing, and there's so many instances of this. I could spend the entire morning show on this. The article that's in the JS Online, which I'll put a link to in this particular video, and it's on our website and on our Facebook page. It is so chock full of abuse that every person in the ATF should be criminally charged. They got people who were mentally deficient. I mean, people with an IQ of 55 and 74. And they got them to go out there and find them guns in the community, even though they knew the guy was a felon. And they were paying more money for these guns than they were worth by far. I mean, they were paying so much money for guns that people were going and buying guns at Gander Mountain and then driving and Bass Pro and big chain retail stores and Walmart, and then driving across town and selling them the same gun that they had just bought 15 minutes ago for a profit. They actually got these two guys that were mentally disabled, and in order to encourage them to be part of the Squid Gang, they encouraged them and they paid for tattoos on their necks with tentacles creeping down their collarbones to show that they were part of the Squid team. Finally, these guys found out that they were being used to set up people in the community. I mean, this is permanent destruction and damage to an individual's body. And both guys were mentally deficient. Here's some of the highlights. ATF agents befriended mentally disabled people to drum up business and later arrested them in 4 cities in addition to Milwaukee. Wichita, Kansas, ATF agents referred to a man with a low IQ as slow-headed before deciding to use him secretly as a key cog in their sting. Agents in Albuquerque, New Mexico gave a brain-damaged drug addict with little knowledge of weapons a tutorial on machine guns, hoping he could find them one. By the way, a machine gun was stolen from them, and it's never been recovered. And they only got one machine gun in the entire sting of all of these different operations in all the different cities. They found one machine gun. And they lost one. So, status quo. Agents in several cities opened undercover gun and drug buying operations in safe zones near churches and schools, allowed juveniles to come in and play video games, and allowed teens to smoke marijuana, and provided alcohol to underage youth. In Portland, attorneys for 3 teens who were charged said a female agent dressed provocatively flirted with the boys and encouraged them to bring drugs and weapons to the store to sell. And they supplied them with alcohol. They didn't allow them to drink alcohol. They gave them the alcohol. Agents damaged buildings they rented for their operations, tearing out walls, rewiring electricity, and then walked off and stuck landlords with the repair bill. Property owner in Portland said agents removed a parking lot spotlight, damaged their new $30,000 roof, and caused leaks before they shut down and disappeared without a way for her to contact them. They have still not paid that owner, by the way. Agents pressed suspects for specific firearms that could fetch higher penalties in court. They allowed felons to walk out of the store armed with guns. In Wichita, agents suggested a felon take a shotgun, saw it off, and bring it back, and provided instructions on how to do it. The sawed-off gun allowed them to charge the man with a more serious crime, because now it's a National Firearms Act weapon. And it comes with a set of penalties that is a minimum of 3 years. In Pensacola, the ATF hired a felon to run its pawn shop. Wait until you hear this one. This one will top the cake. The move widened the pool of potential targets and boosted arrest numbers. Wait until you hear this. Even those trying to sell guns legally could be charged if they knowingly sold to a felon. So this guy put out the word that I'm a felon, and then if somebody sold him a gun, they were charged with it, with selling a gun to a felon, even though the person who was selling the gun was completely legal. The ATF's pawn shop partner was later convicted of pointing a loaded gun at someone outside a bar. Instead of a stiff sentence typically handed down to repeat offenders in federal court, he got 6 months in jail and a pat on the back from the prosecutor. In Milwaukee, they lost the machine gun. They've refused to respond to interview requests. I got to tell you, the number of crimes that were committed during these stings, and for the record, I know a lot of people in law enforcement. I know a lot of state employees who are state police, a lot of sheriff's departments. I know a lot of community police. I even know a lot of federal agents. And I got to tell you, the general resounding comment when you mention the ATF is, yeah, they're F Troop. You remember F Troop, the hapless knuckleheads from a television show back in the 60s? Yeah. The problem is with these hapless knuckleheads is that people are going to prison. How criminal is it to get people to come in and sell a gun to a guy behind a counter who the normal person would assume if he's buying guns, he's not doing something illegal, and then charge them with selling a gun to a guy who's a felon? Members of Congress demanded answers when this thing broke. The Department of Justice's Office of the Inspector General started a review. 8 months later, the ATF has not released a single finding, and the Justice Department investigation isn't complete. You see, what this is Fast and Furious Part 2, domestically. ATF acknowledged the failures in Milwaukee in a congressional briefing with staffers. Staffers. I don't want staffers answering this. I want a criminal prosecution. I want people in prison. At the same time, the agency, listen to this one, admitted they had no written procedures, policies, or guidelines for running undercover operations like this. And they promised to create a written policy, which has so far not been produced. They utilize pawn shops, tattoo parlors, recording studios, and thrift stores, all with no official protocol. They just went out and set these stores up. They set up one store, and they filled, you know what they do? They make it into a head shop, so they fill it up with glass pipes and bongs and crap like that. And the idea that they're going to draw people in who are going to be the type of people they want. Well, interestingly enough, one of their stores got robbed of all of their inventory. And that was the same one where they stole the machine gun out of the guy's car. Unfortunately, this is an agent's quote. Unfortunately, when it comes to reporting to Congress for budget reasons, the numbers are all that count. It is hard to define in a meaningful way to Congress that arresting one person with a long criminal history of 15 felonies is better than arresting 15 people with one felony each. So, here's the deal. The storefront sells them like stuff like hip-hop clothing and shoes, cigarettes, and drug paraphernalia. They were selling cigarettes for as little as $2, for as much as $2 below the normal retail cost. And they were selling $100 blue jeans for $10. Their idea is to get these people in. Now, for the record, a lot of the communities that they started these in were outraged because what they said was, this is a middle-class community. We didn't have crime. But you guys opened this store and you drew in droves of them. You dragged people into our community that weren't there before. They were encouraging people to go out and rob homes and steal stuff. They were encouraging people to go steal and burglarize homes to steal jewelry and weapons and electronics and then buying it. Well, guess what? These criminals weren't robbing those neighborhoods until they opened their store. Most of the cases were so bad. Well, here's a lawyer for a defendant in Wichita. There is enough real crime out there. Why do you have to manufacture it? You're really creating crime, which you are then prosecuting. You got to wonder where the moral high ground is on this. I got to tell you, this is so illegal, so unconstitutional, so unethical, so immoral. They only had one real case that out of all of these cities, 6 cities they did this in, and hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of arrests. They never found a single kingpin. They never found a single guy who was manufacturing machine guns. They never found a single guy who was in charge of a ring. This was all low-level street crime. And the people they busted were nothing more than people that they encouraged to go out there and create the crime so that they could arrest them for it. There was only one guy. He was a guy who was twice indicted on first-degree murder charges, once for killing a guy in prison, and he was later busted in one of their storefront stings for being a felon in possession of a weapon, which gave him no more than a couple of years. In several of these cases, defendants still got stiff sentences, but others resulted in little or no punishment at all. In Wichita, nearly a third of the roughly 50 federal cases charged led to no prison time. Defendants either got probation or had their cases dismissed. One was even acquitted by a jury. These are not the results federal agencies will typically trumpet in the press. Former prosecutors and other experts say the success of these storefront stings should be measured by the capture of high-level targets, not street-level criminals looking to make a quick buck. Quote, this is a U.S. attorney in Milwaukee. For street crime in the federal system, we want cases to take us beyond the immediate person into a more significant and dangerous group. See, this is exactly what they do. They bust somebody small and then promise that guy that he'll get a reduction in sentence if he'll just turn him on to his sources or whatever the case may be. This guy continues on. He says, it seems like these cases stop with the particular individual. That's a waste of federal resources. And this guy is now a defense attorney who is the former head of the organized crime unit of the U.S. Attorney's Office in Milwaukee. He ought to know. He called the stings ineffective and lazy law enforcement. He and others have said that it's surprising that stings fail to take down criminal organizations or nab many major offenders. Quote, this is the same guy, to open a storefront and just have an ad hoc potluck hope, kind of a hope that maybe you'll find somebody who might commit crimes in your presence, that makes no sense to me. They got a bunch of table scraps. That's what they got when it comes right down to it. The list of egregious abuses here is so horrific. They did it in Pensacola. By the way, they got a guy here who was mentally deficient, and they kept giving him shirts and pants and stuff like that. They were giving him commission on stuff he would bring in. And they arrested him after it was all said and done on 100 counts of being a felon in possession of a weapon. The guy had an IQ where was it here? It was like he had an IQ of 54 or something like that. 54. Folks, that is borderline mental retardation. And I don't mean that in a disrespectful way. I'm just saying that when you have an IQ of 54, you're lucky if you can spell your name. This guy actually went before the judge after they charged him on 100 accounts, and they said, I thought I was just doing my job. I didn't think I was doing anything wrong. They tricked me into believing I was doing a good job. And they tell me I was doing a good job, pat me on the back, telling me, you're doing a good job, man. We'd hug each other and stuff like that. And they treated me like they cared about me. I told them I had a felony. I'm just trying to stay out of trouble and make some money. You got to be kidding me. They gave this guy 3 years in prison. He told the judge he was worried he'd be killed in prison because the government made it look like he was working for the agents. And most of the other people that they charged believed that. The other defendants. You see, here's the problem. There's another one. Anything for $1 snags Little Squirrel in Pensacola. Jeremy Norris wasn't a felon. He wasn't prohibited from owning or selling weapons when he put his guns up for sale in a local weekly newspaper. He lived with his parents and his girlfriend. And so they went over and they offered him more money. He had an IQ of 76, a little bit higher than the last guy. But they say it's defined by experts as diminished mental capacity bordering mental retardation. In hours of ATF surveillance video, you can see him stumbling around at one point with his girlfriend, leading him around by the back of his shirt. He didn't have a car, so they went to him. And they offered him more money than his guns were worth. And I'm telling you, this is so criminal. They had a guy that they set up to run the pawn shop who was a felon. His name was Renaud. And if anybody sold him a gun, and he'd mention in casual passing while sometime during the course of their being in the store with him that he was a felon. And if the guy didn't pick up on that and recognize how criminal that was, and he sold him a gun anyway, they had him on tape, and then they'd charge the guy even though he wasn't a criminal. They were paying so much for guns that people went to gun stores, bought firearms, and then sold them to the storefront at a profit the same day. Then this guy Renaud, who was the criminal, and he, by the way, he and the agents joked that this guy that they were using to pin down was half retarded. That was their quote unquote. He's half retarded. By the way, this guy then, the felon that they got to run the store for them, he later on committed his own crime, a gun crime, and he got a break from prosecutors. I'll tell you what. They had one guy they were dealing with who was so mentally deficient, they had to give this guy a tutorial on what is a machine gun. All right, when we come back, I'm gonna tackle the rest of this article. This is so disturbing. You're listening to America's Voice Now. You can find this whole article on our website at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, and on YouTube it'll be right beneath the original header that describes the show. I'm furious about this. We'll be back in just a minute. All right. I wanted to cover this issue on Syria, and I'm gonna. But this thing has got me so frustrated. Because you know what? This is the same kind of crap they do all over the place. They're too lazy and too incompetent and too inept to do their own real work. So they go out and they find people that they can coerce and abuse and then threaten them with all manner of horrors unless they help. And then they get them to go out and do their dirty work for them. In this other location, aside from ensnaring mentally disabled people in their stings, the ATF storefronts in several cities stimulated the market for stolen goods, boosting the appeal of theft and burglary. In Phoenix, they charged this guy with selling 11 weapons to agents at an undercover storefront. He obtained most of the firearms during residential burglaries he committed in late 2010. They got another guy, Roderick Jones, committed 7 burglaries in 6 weeks. He stole generators, air compressors, leaf blowers, oxygen tanks, pressure washers, reaping more than $2,000 in sales from anything for $1. That was the name of their store. Warren Phillips did the same thing, breaking into cars and homes, stealing GPS devices, satellite radios, and even a U.S. Navy-owned computer. He raced immediately over to the undercover pawn shop to make quick cash, as much as $500 at a time. This guy actually even stole a DVD player from their store and then sold it back to them. This guy, here's another guy. He stole a bike outside of a Walgreens, and he rode it straight over to the store to make $25. One of the larger thefts linked to the operation was a theft of wedding and engagement rings worth $15,000 that were stolen 4 months after the store opened. Quote, this is a guy who's a professor from Pittsburgh. It requires no great thinking to know if you accept stolen goods in a pawn shop, people are going to sell you stolen goods. You're asking people who frequent that place to rob and burglarize their neighbors. They later on, after this whole thing blew up, they offered for people to come in at the sheriff's office and find their stuff. Only 23 items were recovered by owners. That didn't include the guns. I'll tell you what. Some of the guns were even stolen from police squad cars. Listen to this. This is so outrageous. ATF agents said in court documents that tried to deter such thefts by paying less for police guns. You've got to be kidding me. So you know, as an ATF agent, that people are breaking into police squad cars and stealing the guns. And your major attempt to deter that is to offer to pay less? The burglaries associated with ATL Blaze caused other problems for local law enforcement as well. Sheriff deputies and local police, unaware that the weapons had already been recovered by federal agents, scrambled around to solve the burglaries, spending untold resources and taxpayer money and time from the police officers interviewing witnesses. And the weapons never made their way back to the owners. There was a pistol that was stolen from one guy's car in 2010, and it was still listed as stolen by the local police department, even when this article was posted. Now, if the ATF recovers a stolen gun, they're supposed to go in and put it into a database that's available to police to say, this serial number, 12345, is stolen. If the ATF recovered the weapon, it should be in our system, says Lieutenant Johnson of the department. We have not received any notification that it was ever recovered. Armed felons were allowed to leave the stores with a violent history now. Not this is not some guy that they got, carrying around an ounce of dope in his pocket and when he was 18 and now he's 40. These are armed felons with a violent history. And it wasn't the only time. In Albuquerque, agents said they didn't know one man was a felon when they let him leave with a revolver. It took them 2 weeks to figure it out. So they're selling guns, obviously, without running background checks, which is, again, illegal. Bandit trading let felons leave the store with guns at least 3 separate times. In a case of Condre Johnson, prosecutors noted that he sold 16 guns to agents. The news release didn't mention that the agents turned him away for one of his guns because it wasn't sawed off, because that leads to a bigger charge. The agents told Johnson they wanted a shorty, meaning a sawed-off shotgun, because having such a gun is more deadly at close range and easier to conceal. It's illegal and can mean additional prison time. Johnson left with the gun to go saw it off, but then called the agents to ask what kind of a saw to use. The agent told him how to do it. Johnny Griffin brought in 2 AK-47s, but the agents only had enough money to buy one. He was allowed to leave with the other, and he was a known felon. Agents never got it back. I'll tell you what. They opened this one of these up in a strip mall right across the street from a middle school. This allowed them to claim, wait until you hear this one. This one was opened right across the street from a middle school in Portland. And this way, when they arrested everybody, because the ATF agent said the location was near a school, it would allow them to utilize enhanced penalties for selling in a, quote, safe zone. You got to be kidding me. Later on, they tried to say that they didn't know it was across the street from a school. Ladies and gentlemen, this is the kind of abuse that is so rampant in our system. And if you think, by the way, that this is a one-off thing, well, first of all, this report only talks about 6 of these that occurred. But I can tell you that there are hundreds of these going on around the country in various formats. They may not all be pawn shops and scrap stores and what have you, but it's all the same. This one store, they got these 2 kids. Both of them were 19, and they were regulars. Both of them had very, very low IQs. And then they gave them the idea of a tattoo. The guys told them if they would be persuaded, or they should be persuaded by the guy at Squids, because he thought he was their friends, and they said, "Now you guys are honorary members of the club." After they got the tattoos, they said agents took pictures and posted them on the phony storefront's Facebook page and their website. Then they charged them with selling drugs within 1,000 feet of a school that they opened up right across the street from the school. You got to recognize. And by the way, all they got them for was selling an ounce of weed. 1 ounce. So tell me that this was worth it. Tell me that this was worth, and by the way, since when is an ounce of weed a federal crime? You see, that's my point when I was talking about this yesterday, when I said to you that the federal prisons are just chock full of people who have not committed federal crimes. Most of them are low-level drug deals. And I got to tell you, you see, all they need is to use the Commerce Clause. All they need to use is the Commerce Clause to say drugs crossed a border. And so they'll set up stings where they make the guy come across the border from one state to another. Like, he'll go from East St. Louis to West St. Louis, East St. Louis in Illinois to Western St. Louis in Missouri, and boom, now they got him on a felony beef. And then they give him federal time for a handful of crack that, wouldn't keep a mouse up all night. And then the worst part is they were charging people in the federal system, just so you understand the criminality of this. The way they were charging people in the federal system was they were saying crack was concentrated cocaine. So it was 100 times the weight. So if you got caught with an ounce of crack, it was like getting caught with 100 ounces of powdered cocaine. And then they were sentencing you based on the 100 ounces you had, which really wasn't 100 ounces. It was only 1. So street-level guys who got caught with, 3 little crack vials that were worth $50, $30, they were getting 20-year sentences. You know how they judge, and I got to tell you, this is so criminal. You know how they utilize in the federal system, you know what they call, or how they gauge the marijuana? Not on, when they catch you with live plants, they don't charge you with the weight of those plants. They charge you with the weight of what those plants would be if they were fully matured. So you get caught with a flower pot in your backyard where you're growing 3 pot plants. The next thing you know, you turn around and they're charging you with 2.5 pounds of marijuana. Why? Because when those plants fully matured, they delivered 2.5 pounds of marijuana. What kind of a farce is that? I know for a fact, I'm telling you, because I did their legal work. I got to tell you, And for the record, for those of you who don't know, the way the federal criminal system works is you don't have to be found guilty beyond a reasonable doubt. That's only in state court. In federal court, you only have to be found guilty by a, quote, preponderance of the evidence. That's the same level of evidentiary requirement that falls under civil cases. That's why you hear about a guy who gets off on a murder charge like O.J. Simpson, but then he loses the civil case when the family sues him for wrongful death. Because in the criminal case, they had to find him guilty beyond a reasonable doubt because it was a state case. But in a civil case, they only got to find him guilty by a preponderance of the evidence. In other words, there's enough evidence here for us to believe that he really probably did it. What kind of a constitutional court system is that? And by the way, 95% of all cases do not go before a jury in the federal system. This is a U.S. district judge and a former federal prosecutor. Here's what he had to say about this whole mess. I guess I don't make the connection. They're concerned that if, among other things, they don't smoke marijuana with this guy, that they'll be given up as law enforcement. So they think a way to derail that is to suggest that he get a tattoo? They got these people to smoke marijuana in front of them. They plied kids with alcohol that the ATF agents, gave them. I tell you what. This is so criminal. Okay, I'm going to wrap this segment and go on to the Syrian thing. Man, I'm so frustrated. My blood pressure is through the roof. Yes, and here's the reason why, folks. You don't realize, just like you didn't know that the NSA 6 months ago, before Edward Snowden burst on the scene, you didn't know that the NSA was sitting there and scarfing up all your data. You suspected it maybe. You kind of thought in the back of your head, well, they probably listened to some people. You had no idea of the extent of it. And what I'm trying to tell you is you have no idea of the extent of the criminality of the state-sponsored, federally sponsored system of terrorism that is being perpetrated on America every single day. You have no clue. You think just because people are in jail, they deserve it. And I'm telling you right now, this system, every prosecutor out there is so corrupt. They don't care whether they got the right guy. They only care whether or not there's a check mark next to that particular section on their report card. How many people did I get convicted? You heard about Ryan Ferguson just getting released in Missouri. I helped an attorney do some legal briefs on a case of a young guy by the name of Joseph Dayringer, who's right now before the Missouri Supreme Court. And they've had this for 8 months now, and they haven't ruled on it yet. This kid was 15. And the prosecutor went to the one witness in the case that could prove that this kid was innocent and threatened him that he would spill the news in prison that he was a rat if he went and testified on this kid's behalf against the real criminal. The prosecutor knew it, and the judge knew it. And they let this kid go to prison. The judge is now dead, and the prosecutor back then, 27 years later, is now a judge. I'm telling you, this system is so corrupt and so evil that there is no way that Americans can allow this to continue to stand. This stuff makes those people in power in Washington look like nincompoops because it is a circle of corruption and evil that is so pervasive because they're not just trying to, hit some national agenda. This is for personal gain. And it's criminal. All right, I got 10 minutes to hit this Seymour Hersh thing. Pulitzer Prize-winning author and journalist Seymour Hersh. Guy's recently written an article out there. He's saying that President Obama was clearly not honest with the American people again. That he knew that the sarin gas was not by Assad's regime, that it was in fact by the rebels. Man, I'm telling you. Hirsch, by the way, if you don't know who Hirsch is, you got to read some of his stuff. There's links in the website, there's links on our Facebook page, and there's links in the subject section of this video. Here's what Hirsch comes out alleges. The administration buried intelligence on the fundamentalist rebel group called al-Nusra. They knew it, that al-Nusra was responsible, and they held it back. They didn't want that out because they wanted to go to war. And frankly, the only reason we didn't go to war is because Americans rose up as a massive collective group, which ought to tell you and prove to you that massive disobedience works. The administration was learning about the attacks at roughly the same speed as the civilians were. Hirsch says through the daily intelligence briefings in the days that surrounded the gas attack, they didn't make a single mention of Syria. The truth is, this administration is so incompetent, they were finding out about it as on CNN and Fox News like you were. The media did nothing to investigate it. Here's this one's criminal. The media succumbed to confirmation bias in response to a UN report on the attack. The report from the UN said that the spent weapon, in other words, the shell, indicatively matches the specifics of a 330 millimeter caliber artillery rocket. Well, MIT professor Theodore Postel and other munitions experts later reviewed the photos and said that's not true. This was an improvised device made locally. It didn't match anything in the Syrian arsenal, and it would not have been able to travel the 9 kilometers that it was fired from if it had actually come from the Syrian army base. But they shelved that. Nobody wanted to talk about that. They published an analysis 2 weeks after the August 21st announcement in which they correctly assessed that the rockets involved carried a far greater payload of the sarin gas than was officially and originally estimated. The Times reported on that analysis, describing Postel and Lloyd as leading weapons experts. But so far, nobody else picked it up. You see, the media has completely and utterly given way. They're no longer media and investigative journalists. All they really now are is they sit there and wait for their email bell to go ding, or they wait for their fax machine to go to buzz, and then they pull an article out that is right off the website, the White House's printers, and then they literally go and call up some official in administration and get a quote from some sycophant in Congress, and then they come out and they report the quote to you, and it's anonymous, unnamed official. I mean, look, that's not investigative journalism. Woodward and Bernstein was investigative journalism. Seymour Hersh is investigative journalism. Cheryl Atkinson, that's investigative journalism. And those people are being beaten over the head by this administration, who are sitting there working to make sure that you don't hear the truth of what's going on around in our nation. Meanwhile, you got people out there like Schumer and Feinstein who are trying to pass limitations on what qualifies as a journalist. If you don't work for a big-name newspaper, you're not a real journalist, according to them. Since when does free speech depend on whom you work for? And for the record, by the way, even the New York Times and the Wall Street Journal started in somebody's garage. Right? I mean, the LA Times was born in somebody's garage and only had one employee at one point in time. Breitbart, which is now a media conglomerate and does expose stuff, would they be considered an official news organization now? I don't know, but when Breitbart started it, it was Breitbart in his living room. So what? Under the new regulations that are desired by Schumer and Feinstein, the monsters, you would be able to say Breitbart is not allowed to have free speech? No, they just killed him. Ladies and gentlemen, I got to tell you, this system has fallen so far from reality of what we should be willing to accept. I'm going to read you an article, or not read you an article, but I'm going to talk to you about this article that is posted where they are referencing 500 writers who have gotten together and said, look, what's going on here with the state and the spying and all of that, this is criminal. They're calling it surveillance is theft. And we're going to talk about it because in that segment, which is the right after this. I got to tell you, I don't understand how America can sit by idly and allow this to go on. And it's not just one area. It's everywhere. I recognize that you feel helpless. But at the same point in time, just sitting here and saying, well, I'm too busy to take that on. I'm too busy to deal with that. Or I don't want to be I don't want to be on a list somewhere. That's not going to cut it, folks. Freedom belongs to those who are going to be willing to demand it and hold on to it and value it. You have to realize where we are. We are so far down the rabbit hole here. And the press is the ones who should be saying to us, with alarm bells clanging, the klaxons whooping, that Americans need to stand up and fight for their nation or we're going to lose it. And they're not. They are not telling us the truth. And people like me are out there. There's lots of these independent people out there, that alternative media who are trying to spread this out there. But folks, what, you don't believe it's credible unless it's on the front page of the New York Times? That's exactly the point. You're never going to see it on the front page of the New York Times. They're playing you because you won't wait to see it, or you won't believe it unless you see it in the New York Times or the Wall Street Journal or on Fox News. But there's a lot of stuff that Fox News is never going to put on. Don't tell me for a second that you think that they are independent of government intrusion into their business. If you actually believe that, look at the owner, Murdoch. The guy's a multi-zillionaire. He owns the Wall Street Journal and the Fox News, and a half a dozen others. I mean, yeah, they dribble out a little here and a little there, but they really never get to the truth. They never get to the core. There's no true investigative exposés. Where is that? If Fox was so great at what they do, why didn't Edward Snowden go to them? Why did he go to the Washington Post and the Guardian newspaper? Why did he go to ProPublica? We are in exigent, immediate danger. And most of America is just sitting around saying, well, what the hell, I got enough beer for tonight. I got a job. I ain't worrying about all that. I'm just worried about whether or not I can pay the mortgage this month. America, you're losing it. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. You can find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org and .com. You can find our Facebook page at facebook.com/America's Voice Now. And you can find our YouTube channel at youtube.com/America's Voice Now. You can also find us at Spreaker.com. That's like speaker with an R. Spreaker.com/user/America's Voice Now, where you can actually download these episodes. If you have a mobile phone, you can use the Spreaker app on your mobile phone. Just download it from either iTunes or Android, and then search for Michael Evans, America's Voice Now, and then you can listen to these right on your cell phone. And share, folks. Please share these stories and messages. If you think this has impact, then share it with somebody. We'll be back in just a moment.
It's about the restoration of our republic. We want to educate, encourage, enable the power. We stand for integrity, honesty, self-reliance, self-defense, and most importantly, no compromise on our foundational principles. This is America's Voice Now.
Find America's Voice Now on Facebook and at americasvoicenow.org. Here's Michael Evans.
All right. Good morning, America. You're listening to America's Voice Now. My name is Michael Evans. I'm your host here. We're here every day from 8 a.m. until 10 a.m. Central Time. You can catch our show live on our website at americasvoicenow.org. We're in our third segment this morning. You can also find us on Big Country 99.3 KUNQ. That is the Rooster Radio Network. Outstanding group of folks up there. We're there from midnight until 2 a.m. in the morning. And if you're interested in advertising with us during that period, and you're a business in the community or a national business, of course your ads can run with us here online and what have you. We are in the process and just short of finishing off our video studio. We are in desperate need of some financial support. If you can see any way that you can help us, we are surely in need. Our goal is to create a television news type program that would be all truth all the time. No nonsense, no fluff. We're just going to talk about the real hardcore issues of what is destroying and stripping and killing our nation. If you've got skills and talents that will help us and you don't have money, then please contact me. You can contact me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. We need your help. We need writers. We need people who have web development skills. We need people who have camera skills. We need people who have, anything that's in the media arena. If you're a young person and you would like to learn about media and you're willing to volunteer some time, give me a call. We found a brand new building that we'd like to rent, but the money is very serious. This is a awesome facility for a video studio, but we really need some financial backing. If you're an individual that takes our program seriously and realizes the value and the benefits of what we do, then by all means, please contact me, mike@americasvoicenow.org. All right, this topic is going to be about the NSA infiltrating online gaming. And before I get into that, the battery station on Washington Avenue in West Plains is doing their annual troop drive. They donate and send over all kinds of things, from non-food items like baby wipes and stuff like that to our troops over in Afghanistan. And this year it will be the D Company 1-8 Cav, and they're stationed out in the bush in Afghanistan. These guys don't take showers for weeks, guys. So they're looking for unscented baby wipes and soap and stuff like that, magazines, newspapers, books, toilet paper, toothbrushes, hand lotion, cotton swabs, razor blades, all kinds of stuff, underwear, socks, shaving cream, that kind of stuff, right? They also want food items, including beef jerky and peanuts and cashews and snack foods and stuff like that, vitamins, crackers, oysters, tuna fish in cans, anything that'll stay for a long time. Not in cans, by the way, but in the foil packs, okay? Anything that you send has to be, remember, it can't be scented, because these guys are out there in the bush and they're fighting. You don't want walking around smelling like, like cologne. So anyway, what you can do is there's three different ways you can get information and or a donation to the battery station. One, you can call them at 417-257-7799. That's 417-257-7799. You can also email them at troops@batterystation.com. troops@batterystation.com. You can also bring your donation into them. They're on Washington Avenue at 303 Washington Ave in West Plains. And if you're not local and you'd like to support their efforts, then by all means, please do so. They can take cash donations. They can take donations of product. And they can accept, if you want to mail some or ship some stuff over to them, they can do that as well. They pay for the shipping out of this every year out of their own pocket. They donate thousands and thousands of batteries and flashlights and all kinds of stuff. This is really a great effort by, and this is not sponsored by anybody in any way, shape, or form. I know for a fact, because I know the battery station folks, they're good friends of mine, it costs them literally thousands of dollars a year out of their pocket to do this. And so any help that you can provide, please do. Stop giving money to these charities where only 30% of the money actually gets somewhere, and give it to somebody who can actually put 100% of it to good use. The Battery Station at batterystation.com, 417-257-7799, or at 303 Washington Avenue. If you want, call them and ask them what they need if you're going to send product. If you want, you can call them and send them a check, or they'll take a credit card over the phone, whatever. Also, visit their store. They have great stuff there. Not only batteries, but all kinds of gear. Okay, the NSA, this is such a joke. Edward Snowden dropped another bomb. They literally were so deeply embedded in this online gaming stuff on World of Warcraft and these different Second Life and these other, online gaming systems. There were so many of them in there pretending to be a game player, trying to listen in on chats, and they were actually getting the online conversations, because a lot of these games, if you're not a gamer, they got a microphone with them, and they chat amongst themselves with text, but in addition to that, with these microphones, they actually can talk to each other. So they're spying on online gamers now. Not a single terrorist, not even a single terrorist issue was brought to the fore. They built mass collection capabilities against Xbox Live console. There's 48 million people who play that Xbox Live, folks. And they built an entire mass collection system so that they could listen in on the conversations, get the texts, and in addition to that, because you register and you're charged for a lot of these games, they have all of your information now about who you are and where you live and your credit card information and your age and all the stuff that you put into those registration systems when you register to play a game online like that. I mean, this is such a joke. They didn't find one single example of a terrorist using this for either transferring money or passing secret messages or anything else. But these guys were so thick in there, they actually had to write a protocol for which department should watch out for which other guys. So in other words, the guys from the CIA and the guys from the NSA and the guys from the FBI, they were so deep in here, they had to write a protocol to keep them separated so they weren't investigating each other, thinking, because they were pretending they were terrorists. I mean, this is unbelievable. And they weren't doing it just here. They were doing it in the UK through the GCHQ, which is their NSA, their FBI, their CIA. Now, there's articles out on this in ProPublica. There's articles out on the Washington Times, the New York Times, and the Guardian newspaper. And, the ridiculousness of this is that it was all based on fear that terrorists would start using these networks to communicate secretly or move money or plot attacks. But not a single thing has been stopped. They can't point to one single win. There were so many FBI, CIA, and Pentagon spies hunting around in Second Life that the document released by Edward Snowden says they had a deconfliction group that was needed to avoid collision. The intelligence agencies may have even inflated the threat. I mean, this is like the ATF thing that I did in the first segment, except I'm disgusted to call myself an American when this is what our country has fallen to. That Americans are not rising up in massive numbers and saying, you know what? We've had enough and we're going to all go stand in Washington, D.C., and we're not leaving until we kick all these tyrants out of office, tar and feather them, and throw them into a position where we can make sure they never do any damage or injury to this nation again. and restore us back to some level of a constitutional government. By the way, they checked with the companies, World of Warcraft and the parent companies who own that, and Second Life. They don't know a thing about it. We're unaware of any surveillance taking place, says Blizzard Entertainment, which runs World of Warcraft. If it was, it would have been done without our knowledge or our permission. Microsoft, of course, refused to declined to comment. That's because their Xbox game. Well, not for nothing, but Microsoft is so in bed with these people that you got to imagine that they're having babies together. So is Google, and so is AOL and Facebook and all the rest of them. For the record, by the way, these same high-tech companies are out there touting they need immigration for high-skilled labor. The United States of America is pumping out literally 40% more what they call science and technology people, or I think they call them STEM, science, technology, education majors. And they're saying, we don't have enough skilled labor. That's not true. The colleges are pumping out scores of American young men and women who have Masters of Science and Bachelors of Science degrees. What they really want, Google, AOL, Facebook, all of these major companies, Microsoft, what they really want is they want so many people flooding the market, including foreigners, who are willing to work for less, that it forces the wages down from the Americans who are graduating college, who are prepared to go to work but demand higher wages. These are the people who want to start at 40, 50 grand a year because they spent the last 8 years getting a master's degree. But this way they can get a foreigner who comes over here, he gets most of his degree overseas, comes over here and finishes it. But he's willing to work for 30 grand a year because 30 grand a year to him is a king's ransom back in his home country. And he's willing to live with 7 other guys in a small apartment. Americans are not. They want to live there in a house by themselves with 3 bedrooms, even though they're single. And so the real goal here is for all of these major high-tech companies who are pushing so hard for immigration, they're firing thousands of Americans right now, claiming there's not enough high-tech educated people out there. And then they're trying to push the labor market price down by bringing in a bunch of illegals who will do the work for a whole lot less. That's what this is really about, ladies and gentlemen. And that is what the push for immigration is all about. By the way, for the record, John Boehner today posted up on his website that he is opening up, he's filed his re-election documents, right? I went over there and I posted an article about how to reduce immigration, and they deleted my comments repeatedly over and over and over and over and over. They're up on our Facebook page and on our website. They deleted the comments. They refused to allow me to post up on John Boehner's website. That's censorship, ladies and gentlemen. I don't delete comments off my Facebook page. I don't delete them off of our website. And I never delete them off of YouTube or anything else along those lines. These guys routinely do that. I don't even delete those that are negative. There's people on my YouTube videos that say I'm an idiot. I leave it up there. What do I care? Everybody's entitled to his opinion. In fact, everybody's entitled to their free speech. And even though I disagree with them, I'll die to defend their ability to have it. I wonder if John Boehner would do the same. Not hardly. You see, the problem here, ladies and gentlemen, is that like this group, the NSA and the ATF and the EPA and all of these other agencies out there, all of these have grown so big that their mission is no longer you. Their mission has now become, how do I get bigger, more powerful, stronger as an agency? Yes, they use the old tired and worn out motto, we're keeping America safe. But, that's like sitting there saying that the ATF considers themselves to be protecting America when they're out there sitting there talking a retard into getting a tattoo on his neck. and robbing the neighbors' homes in a neighborhood he was never robbing homes in before. Tell me that's keeping America safe. That's like the Department of Justice saying that the real purpose behind Fast and Furious was to find people who were marketing guns to drug cartel men. Let me tell you something. That's such a crock of crap. First of all, the cartel people have more than enough money. They've got more money than we've got. They don't need our crappy little semi-automatic Ruger 1022. They can buy container shipments full of AK-47s. What do they need 50 or 100 smuggled across the risky American border for? It's a pile of garbage. And the same thing here. What is the NSA spending literally, and the CIA and the FBI spending literally millions upon millions of American taxpayer dollars to allow their agents to play video games? It's just shameful behavior, and it's so far beyond the pale of what we should be willing to allow. There's an art there with the 500 signatories, including 5 Nobel Prize winners today, announced that they have sent a personal open letter to President Obama and to the United Nations asking for a complete global scope outline for human rights in terms of privacy. They're demanding a digital bill of rights to curb abuses from government. These are the world's leading authors. And here's what their quote is. State surveillance is personal data theft. Hey, listen, if you found your neighbor was sitting there scamming you and listening into your Wi-Fi and listening into your telephone calls, you'd report them to the police. But when it's the government, you like, well, they're just doing it to keep me safe. The hell they are. They're doing it to find out anything and everything they can about you so that you can be identified and profiled. And if you don't believe that this administration is capable of doing something nefarious with it, that's fine. I'll buy that. I'll even give you credibility for it. I don't agree with you, but I'll accept it. What about the next administration? What about the one after that? It's only a matter of time until the next little Hitler jumps into play. And what's he going to do with this massive database where he's got a built enemies list already prefabricated for him or her? 500 of the world's leading authors, 5 Nobel Peace Prize winners, are condemning the scale of state surveillance. By the way, guess who was the author and the creator of this? Edward Snowden. He was the guy who broke all of this. They call him a terrorist. I call him an American patriot. I call him a global patriot. The guy should get the Nobel Peace Prize. I don't care about government saying, well, he's releasing our secrets. You don't belong having secrets. Not when they involve us. Not when they are used against us. Not when our money is spent for you to develop these secret plans and these conniving, scheming games that bear no semblance to security for America. In all of this massive surveillance we've been finding out about, you know what they tout? Their claim to fame and their claim to success is 54 terrorist accounts or terrorist plots have been broken. But guess what? Upon real review, everybody who's really looked at it said, if anything, it played a very, very minor role. It didn't uncover a single plot. They may have, once the plot was uncovered, used the technology to be able to go in and listen to the guy, but it wasn't and it was a minor role at best. 54. So you're trying to tell me that 7 billion people can be tracked on the planet 24/7, 365, so you can break up 54 terror plots? Not for nothing, but if they were so great, why didn't they catch the Boston bomber? Because they were too busy playing video games. That's why. Don't buy the crock of garbage that you were sold. We're at the end of the rainbow, America. This ain't a pot of gold. It's a pile of dog excrement in a bucket. The holy grail for this government is for you to have zero privacy about anything. They want to follow you, track you, listen, observe, watch, monitor. That's it. They don't care about anything else. They'll claim it's to save you and to keep you safe. Listen, let me tell you something. If that's the world I've got to live in, where I can't have any privacy whatsoever, I'll take the risk of the terrorist attack. The truth of the matter is, you stand to be killed by your own government more than you stand to be killed by some terrorist who comes over here in a shawl and sets himself off. Your chance of being killed by a terrorist domestically in the United States is so infinitesimal. It's almost not worthy of doing the mathematical equation. It's astronomical. Yet your risk of being monitored, tracked, and profiled so that you can be entered into an enemy's database, that's 100%. And what do they have planned for you? Well, I don't know. The DHS is loading up like a domestic army. They're filling up the law enforcement departments around the nation with weapons and ammo and military vehicles. You got this knucklehead out there yesterday coming out saying that guns should be pried from the cold, dead hands of Americans. I'm telling you, America, one of these days you're going to wake up and you're going to find that everything that you've ever known, everything you've ever hoped, everything you've ever cared about, everything you've ever dreamt for this nation is gone like smoke in the wind. That our nation has fallen. And that we are now living in a massive police state that would make the Stasi or Stalin or Hitler rub his hands with glee. You know, the Germans, nobody was better than the Germans at record keeping. Nobody. I mean, you take a German Luger apart. Do you know that there's 28 places where a serial number is embedded on a German Luger? Hitler would be dancing the jig at this kind of surveillance. You're listening to America's Voice Now. We're going to take a quick break. When we return, we're going to talk about Obamacare and how it's stripping volunteer fire departments of their insurance. Unbelievable. And that most of the state exchanges are wide open to Wi-Fi attacks where people are stealing the data and information from you. There's only two that aren't. One is the federal, and there's one state that's secure. The rest of them are a wide open field for data theft and identity theft. And that they're keeping us safe, right? Yeah, right. We'll be right back. You know, if your government is so interested in keeping you safe, why are they exposing you and your personal information, your healthcare records, your financial data, your identity? Why are they exposing you to theft and being robbed by foreign governments, criminals, terrorists? Well, the answer is pretty simple. They're really not interested in your safety. That's just the excuse they tell you. This article out in the National Review. State exchanges are vulnerable to Wi-Fi theft. The other article that really bears listening to is the public safety disaster of Obamacare that's going to force thousands of volunteer fire departments to close. The Affordable Care Act forces companies with more than 50 workers to buy them all health insurance or pay hefty fines. The IRS says volunteer firefighters are employees, even though the Department of Labor says they're volunteers. They're not paid. How can they be an employee? In order to be an employee, you have to be compensated. Volunteer firefighters are not compensated. There's more than 1 million fire departments in the United States, and 87% of them are staffed entirely or mostly by volunteers. Now, there's a couple of people in Congress who have raised the issue, but Obama and the entire HHS are ignoring their concerns, and they haven't yet carved out a firefighting exception. But damn it, if the unions were calling for it, boy, they'd be all over that. If one of his fundraisers who kicks in $500,000 called for it, boy, there'd be a waiver written so fast the paper would be on fire. But no, if this is about keeping America safe, you're going to force thousands and thousands and tens of thousands of volunteer firefighters to lose, or volunteer fire departments to shut down. That's keeping America safe, though, ain't it? Yeah, that's a real great focal point. That's the goal you're trying to achieve. You know, those people who out there say President Obama is doing a bad job, they're wrong. The truth is that this sycophantic dictator is doing a phenomenal job, but only from his perspective and the perspective of those people who are looking to, these are the elitists, the statists, who want to own you. They want to own you. You are livestock to be culled and sheared and chopped up and fed to them. You're collateral damage, and you're of no consequence. And if you've outlived your usefulness, hey, too bad. If that's the country that you really, truly want to live in, I don't understand it. Why don't you just go to prison? Go commit a crime and go to prison. Because in prison, they'll take good care of you. They'll feed you 3 squares a day. You'll get a cot to sleep in. All your bills will be paid. You won't have any electric bill. You won't have to worry about gasoline. You won't have to worry about a natural gas bill. You won't have to worry about how you're going to pay for insurance. Healthcare's free. It's part of the package. You know, you're a little bit limited in where you can go. I mean, honestly, if that's what you're looking for, is to be so taken care of that you're like a babe in the womb, if that's your idea of a good life, that's open to you. Go rob a bank or commit a burglary or armed robbery or something, and then just stand there and wait for the police to come. There are countless stories of people who have actually committed a crime because they needed medical care and they couldn't get it outside. They're homeless or whatever, so they just go commit a crime knowing that once they get to prison, their medical problem will be taken care of. Their cancer will be treated or whatever. They'll get their bypass surgery, whatever the heck it is. I mean, you can join the ranks. We have 25% of the planet's inmate population. We're only 5% of the total population on the planet, but we have 25% of all the inmates. There's plenty of room for you. Don't worry about it. You won't have to worry about your house burning down because, let's face it, there's not going to be any volunteer fire departments after a little while. You don't even have to pay for health care. It comes free. They'll take good care of you. The truth is, you already live like that. You just don't know it yet. You may not get the freebies, the free food and the free cot, but you're enslaved. You're enslaved to debt. You're enslaved to working so hard just to make ends meet that you don't have the time to say, wow, what the heck is going on around me? You're enslaved by a media that constantly pumps propaganda into your ears and into your eyes and into your soul and your spirit. You spend your time playing video games. What is that accomplishing? You spend your time counting football scores and writing down the name of this guy and that guy, what his batting average was. I got to memorize that. Man, I got to spend hours on my fantasy football team. But you can't name the Vice President of the United States. You can't name a single founder or come up with one legitimate quote from one founder. You've never read your Constitution, not since you were in the 6th grade. And now they're not even teaching it in the 6th grade. They're giving you a paraphrased version of it because of Common Core. Your kids aren't learning what you learned. When was the last time you read the Federalist Papers? When was the last time you read a book? Any book. Science fiction novel. I don't care. Why? Because it rewires your brain in a proper way to think critically and clearly. That's why. Because it gives you language skills that you don't possess right now because you haven't read one in 25 years. Because it teaches you how to spell, because you see the word so many times that it becomes commonplace. And the next time you're trying to figure out how to spell spouse, oh, it's right there in the front of your forehead, and your mental eye sees it. Because it teaches you geography, and because it teaches you science, and it teaches you ways of interaction, and it teaches you language skills. And it teaches you facts and figures and the concepts. It allows you to take complex issues and break it down so that you can explain it to those who are not quite so gifted. But you're not interested in truth. And you're not interested in gut-wrenching reality. You'd rather pretend in this little escapist world that you want to just race around in, and man, it doesn't really matter as long as, I got my home to come home to. I'm just worn out at the end of the day. I got a 6-pack in the fridge. I got a ball game I can watch. Some sitcom. Get on the internet, play a few games. Maybe read a magazine about what the stars in Hollywood are doing. And the tornado is moving in on us. What you don't realize is that your inability, your refusal to stand up. We're all tied to it. Every one of us is tied to your action or inaction. You personally are going to be responsible for the success or the failure of this nation. You, individually, singularly, you. And whatever that outcome is, you're saddling us with it or benefiting us with it. Just you. Not your wife, not your husband, not your children, not your father. Just you. Your action, just yours. When does the tide turn? At what point have you moved enough that the snowball begins to grow and roll? What constitutes outrage for you? Where does it stop? Is it when you say, well, I get it, but these guys are just too powerful. I got to pay this bill and I got to take that insurance. And I know they're spying on me and I really don't like it. So, but instead of fighting it, instead of rising up and demanding that they stop, I think what I'll do is I'll just change the way I talk to my friends and my family. Man, I hate when I go to the motor vehicle department and they want to take my facial recognition picture and they're going to make me look in this machine so that they can put a pattern on my eye. You know, everywhere I go, they want me to fill out a form and sign. And at the bottom, it always says the same thing. You're signing this subject to perjury, and you're subject to penalty of law for a lie. You're signing your rights away every day. Boy, I hate how they spend my money. They go out there and they spend my money on all this stupid stuff and leave me to pay for it. When during during this list that grows by the moment, are you going to say enough is enough? Or aren't you? Are you just going to capitulate and say, I let it go so long now, it's too big and I can't do anything? Is that where this goes? You know, the problem is that I'm too busy. I don't have any money. I can't do that. I can't take that time off of work to go over there. I can't drive all the way up to go protest at the Capitol building. I can't go to Washington and sit there and camp out in Washington and storm the castle with you because I've got to go to work. Could lose my truck. They'll take my house. I'm afraid. They'll pick me up with that facial recognition camera they're scanning the crowds with. Well, the fact is, folks, they've got your facial recognition picture to do the match. How do you think they got it in the first place? You think that house is worth something to you now? If we had to run into some kind of a fiscal collapse because we're at $17 trillion in debt and physical hard cash that we owe not only to the Federal Reserve but to China, and we're not talking about the $200 trillion that nobody wants to talk about on the backside of that, you think you're going to be able to keep your home? You think that truck is going to go somewhere when gas is $26 a gallon? You think that truck is going to go somewhere when that gas is $8 a gallon? You think it's even going to get you down to the store where bread is going up so fast that they change the price from the time you walk in the store to the time you get up to the counter to pay for it? It's a false dream. And then when you really go to protest, then when you say, hey, I don't have a choice, I've got to do something. I got no job. They took my house. My family and I are sleeping in the truck, and the only reason they haven't taken that is because they can't figure out where we are. Then what are you going to do? Now I got to go to Washington and protest. But now you can't because you got no food and you got no money to get there, and you can't even travel because the gas is $8 or $12 or $15 a gallon. And the roving bands of thugs that are made up of both the society's worst and the rest of the thugs in government, they'll never let you get there. If you think this is far off the mark, if you think I'm wearing a tinfoil hat 2 inches thick, you go right on thinking that. But I'm going to tell you something. When that price comes up and it has to be paid, there ain't going to be enough grief, enough remorse in the universe to make you feel better. When your kids are sitting there saying, but Mommy, I'm hungry. I haven't eaten in 2 days, Mommy. And your son says, Daddy, I'm thirsty. I'm cold. I want to go home. What are you going to say? I'm sorry. Because I didn't have the courage of my convictions and the wisdom to see the obvious handwriting on the wall. They're entrusting their future, their life to you. And you're not doing a very good job protecting them. When your wife is looking at you and saying, what should we do? What are we going to do? What are you going to do? Say, well, we should have done something a couple of years ago when we saw this coming. Think that's going to put food in your belly? We've slipped so far down, and we've adopted the slave mentality and the thinking that our dependency on government will somehow, some way pay off. You trust them that much that they're not incompetent enough to screw it up? Let's just suggest for a moment that it's not malicious. It's just sheer rank incompetence. If it's so incompetent, why would you put your family's future, your future, in their hands? Willingly, knowingly. Even if you don't believe that it's some nefarious, ulterior, evil plan. Okay. But why would you trust these people who you see routinely screw things up, even with the best of intentions, with your life? Who would do that? And it's not just your life. It's It's our lives. It's our nation. It's our children. It's our futures. It's not just you. I know it's easy to sit there and be concerned and say, well, I got to take care of number one. Well, I get that. But if you think you can go live out there as an island unto yourself, you're a fool. Go ahead and try it. Get yourself a pocket knife, go out into the woods and try to live there in the primitive lifestyle and see how far you get. Take your whole family with you and see how far all of you get. Take 50 people in a community and their families, and now you might have something. Because somebody's got the skill to figure out how to make some rope, and the other one's got some skill to figure out how to make some clothing. You can't live isolated. And yet you're making issues and decisions on issues in an isolated format. It's all about me. That's why we form societies. Because nobody can go it alone. And we all benefit from the collective input of everybody. But when society gets to the point where it's now no longer benefiting us, but is using us as a food source, something's gone horribly wrong. The truth is, you all know it's happening. Some of you, obviously, right in front, right up front, you know it, you talk about it on a routine basis, you're concerned about it, you try to take action. How many of you listening to this right now only admit it to yourselves late at night in the back of your mind? And then you turn on the television or some music so that you don't have to think about it too long. You want distraction. You seek it because it helps you to ignore the reality of what you know is right around the corner. Even if you don't believe economic collapse is right around the block. Even if you don't believe that the stuff that's going on around you, the surveillance and the abuse and the tactics that are being used against you are detrimental to you. Your alarm bells are going off right here. And you know something's wrong. Desperately wrong. Not just an inkling that, hey, maybe we're a little lost here. You're standing there in full-fledged knowledge. It's like stopping in the woods and saying, okay, it's time I acknowledge I am lost. I don't know where I am. I don't recognize anything around me. I don't know how I got here, and I don't know how to get back. You can't just keep marching off into infinity. You got to do something. Sit, think, make a plan, take some action. You're listening to America's Voice Now. Find us on the web at americasvoicenow.org, facebook.com/America's Voice Now, youtube.com/America's Voice Now, Spreaker.com/user/America's Voice Now. Please like our Spreaker page so we can get onto iHeartRadio. It will help broaden our scope and our expansion. If you can support us in any way, you can contact me at mike@americasvoicenow.org. I pay for everything that we do out of my pocket, folks. I could really use some help. God bless you all. Have a wonderful day. I'll see you tomorrow.